up, you guys? My name is Aubrey, this is my channel, and we have a lot going on in Washington, D.C. between now and the beginning of August, and I want to talk about it all in this video. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down what to expect in the coming weeks, what could and could not become a reality, and most importantly, what any of this has to do with you. So let's get started. So we are currently in a heated debate in Washington, D.C. regarding infrastructure. Now I know, infrastructure is typically not a sexy topic to talk about because it's all about transportation. It's all about bridges, roads, railways, airports, ports, and so much more. But in 2021, infrastructure has taken a 180, and now infrastructure includes a lot of things that I know you guys that watch this channel are very, very interested in, and it is important to know what's going on out of Washington, D.C. so that you know what to expect. Now, as you guys know, this past spring, President Joe Biden announced two key proposals, the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan. These were two infrastructure plans that were announced with the idea that they would help rebuild the American economy and make America more competitive. The American Jobs Plan had a focus on traditional infrastructure, jobs, and clean energy, while the American Families Plan had a focus on more social issues, and it was dubbed the Social Infrastructure Bill. So putting an emphasis on programs that would benefit American families, like, for example, free community college, universal preschool, Medicaid expansion, and more. Now, of course, and to no surprise to anybody, this received a ton of pushback from Republican lawmakers specifically, because many people did not like the fact that Democratic lawmakers were clumping infrastructure with non-infrastructure related issues, and these two things have been clumped together really as a negotiating tactic, which to Republicans simply wouldn't fly. Well, over the last couple of months since this was announced, there's been a ton of discussion back and forth between Republican lawmakers, Democratic lawmakers, President Joe Biden and his administration, and it seems as though finally a couple of weeks ago there was an agreement that Republican lawmakers and the president had reached regarding a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. This is a bill that focused on more traditional infrastructure, things like roads, bridges, railways, ports, things like that, things that I talked about earlier. But a key portion of this equation that had yet to be addressed is the American Families Plan, this social infrastructure idea. And recently, in the last couple of days, Democratic lawmakers have come out and said that there has been a deal that has been reached as far as the social infrastructure side of the equation. Or at least we are assuming that it involves the social infrastructure side of the equation. So as of right now, we have two different bills. We have this $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that has been agreed upon by a small group of Republicans and the president. This is a bill that as of now looks as though it's going to go through the traditional voting process. It's going to need to pass in the Senate, it's going to need to pass in the House, and then it will need to be signed by the president. This involves traditional infrastructure. The second part of the equation is this $3.5 trillion infrastructure bill that was just announced by Senator Chuck Schumer a few days ago. This is a bill that will have to go through a second type of process, a process known as the process of budget reconciliation. This is a process that allows for lawmakers to get a bill passed without needing the same amount of votes that you would need if a bill was to go through the traditional voting process. This means that the majority party can sometimes use this tactic as a way to get certain pieces of legislation passed without any Republican support. The big caveat here, though, is that it has to be budget-related legislation. You can only use the process of budget reconciliation for budget-related bills. And it looks as though Democrats are trying to use this method in order to get this $3.5 trillion bill passed. Now, we still don't know a whole lot about this bill. It's just been announced a couple of days ago, and there hasn't been a physical piece of paper that has been released in order for us to analyze it. So there's still a ton that's up in the air and still a ton that we don't know. But as of right now, according to some lawmakers and their sources, it looks as though this $3.5 trillion bill will include a handful of the really significant programs that President Joe Biden proposed earlier this year, including expansion to Medicare to include things like vision, hearing, and dental. But as of right now, it's unclear of whether or not this includes things like free community college, universal preschool, free paid family leave, and there's going to be a lot of debate on whether those items are even considered budget related. So I'm certainly not going to be holding my breath on whether or not they'd be included in this bill. But the really good news, and the one thing that is included in this bill, at least according to sources, as of right now nothing's confirmed, But according to a handful of sources, there is verbiage in this bill that prohibits tax increases on any individuals making $400,000 or less, which is huge news because I know many of you guys that watch this channel, this is something that you were concerned about. But it is important to note that as of right now, it's unclear if this is $400,000 per individual or $400,000 per tax return. So for example, if you were an individual making $400,000, would you be safe? But if you were a married couple making $400,000 each, so $800,000 in accumulation, would you be okay in that case? Like, what does the tax situation look like if you are single versus married versus a head of household? How will that look like? What are the tax implications for these different types of people? That is something that as of now is unclear, and I am definitely interested in learning more about it. Now, as far as timelines and what we can expect in the coming weeks, Senator Chuck Schumer has actually come out and said that he hopes to have these passed by the time lawmakers go on recess in August. Now, if I'm being honest, I think this is an aggressive time frame. I don't think that there is a huge likelihood that this is going to be the reality, but I certainly don't think it's impossible. If I was a betting woman, I would probably bet that this is going to become a reality, if it becomes a reality, at some point in September, October. But who knows, maybe August is realistic after all. Now, it is important to note that as of right now, there is still a really long way that both of these pieces of legislation need to go before they'll actually become a law. In the case of the $1.2 trillion infrastructure package, it still needs to be negotiated on by lawmakers. It was agreed upon by a small group of Republicans as well as the president, but that barely scratches the surface, and lawmakers across both sides of the aisle, as well as in the Senate and Congress, will need to look this over before anything becomes set in stone. In the case of the $3.5 trillion budget resolution bill, it has to go through an even more strenuous process, where senators will dig apart this budget resolution. They'll go through it line by line and section by section, where they will have to negotiate and vote on each individual section. And you better believe that there will be a ton of pushback by both Republicans and some Democrats about what can and cannot be included in this budget resolution. Once the senators have gone through this process, it will be passed to the House, where the House will negotiate and vote on it. And then once it's done in the House, it will be passed back to the Senate. And then once it's voted on again in the Senate, it will then be passed to the president, where he will sign it into law. So it is an accurate statement to make that we are far from the finish line, but we are making progress, and it will be really interesting to see what happens in the next couple of weeks. Now, remember that the child tax credit started getting distributed last week, and so if you received that, I would love to hear about it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. There are still EIDL grants, loans, and cash advances being administered, so if you're somebody who wants to receive grant funding, then check out some of my previous videos that I made on the topic. If you're interested in checking out any of this content that I've made in the past regarding these topics, and you can find all of this information and more in the stimulus package playlist, which is on my channel. And like always, you guys, if you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.